Let's dive into the most important position in fantasy football. We are going to be ranking anybody you would consider drafting. I don't want to go 10 deep. I don't want to go 12 deep. I'm going to talk about any tight end you would ever consider drafting, and we are going to rank them for the 2022 season. Before we get into it, though, make sure you go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel. If we hit 90,000 subscribers before the season starts, we are going to fire up a 24-hour live stream draft marathon. Don't know how I'll do it, but I'll find a way. And also, I just appreciate all the support so much that the first 200 comments left in this video, I am going to go through. I'm going to take the time out of my day. I will answer every single one of those comments that you have. But let's not waste your time. Let's dive right in here. Kelce 1, Andrews 2. Now, I know if you're just now diving into the fantasy football landscape for this upcoming season, you're probably surprised that myself and most fantasy football managers have Travis Kelce at the one spot over Mark Andrews. Because, hell, Mark Andrews last year was the tight end 1 in fantasy. Andrews in his age 26 season compared to Travis Kelce, someone who's turning 33. Kelce is going to turn 33 this upcoming season, which, hell, I mean, I think that's something we need to address when no other player in fantasy football that's not a quarterback is being drafted with any type of a respectable draft capital and is this old. So let's get that elephant out of the room. I will say the reason why we are having Mark Andrews at the 2 spot behind Travis Kelce is the overall passing volume that you're going to see in Baltimore this year compared to what happened last season. Because if we go through, if we look at what you had in 2020 for the Baltimore Ravens, when they had healthy running backs, when they had their defensive playmakers, when they had Lamar Jackson there the entire season, the Baltimore Ravens had 406 pass attempts. The 5th lowest volume passing offense in the NFL was at 500. Like, Baltimore wants to be the run heaviest team in the league, and they don't want it to be close either. They got away from this last year because they had to. You lost J.K. Dobbins. You lost Gus Edwards. You lost key defensive members, creating the Baltimore Ravens a game script where they had to be throwing the ball to catch up with teams in the second half. That's not what you're going to expect with a healthy Baltimore this upcoming season. You're going to expect the Baltimore is right back to being one of the better teams in the NFL where they are able to just run the ball over and over and over and over again. So we should expect that passing volume in the Baltimore Ravens offense to dramatically come down. I'm still expecting Mark Andrews to be an elite level tight end option, which is why we have him ranked here at 2, because I do expect that while the volume may come down, the passing efficiency is going to come up from Tyler Huntley to Lamar Jackson. If we look at Tyler Huntley this past season, guys, I understand, yes, I mean, he had stretches where he made some decent plays, but in reality, he was horrible. He was atrocious. 5.1 adjusted yards per pass attempt. If we compare that to Lamar Jackson throughout his entire NFL career, Lamar Jackson, while he's not necessarily been a great NFL passer, he's sitting at 7.7 adjusted yards per pass attempt. So I think you do need to project Andrews to get slightly worse this upcoming season, not due to anything in his own right, but just due to the lack of overall passing volume in Baltimore. I don't think his production's going to crater, though, because I think the drop in volume may be offset with the rise in efficiency. So I just want to explain why Kelce will be 1, Andrews will be 2, but in reality, I love drafting these guys, especially if you were playing in a shallow redraft format. I've talked about this a lot in depth, but you really need to be adjusting for the actual league that you're playing in. If you're playing in an 8-team league, if you're playing in a 10-team league where you only start 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, and a flex, the tight end position is going to make up such a high percentage of your starting lineup output every single week that having a Kelce, having an Andrews, it's an absolute cheat code. So in a format like that, I'm taking Kelce into round 1. I'm reaching on Andrews in the middle of round 2, and I'm going to be willing to overpay because of the unique advantage we are getting with one of those elite players at that tight end slot. Now let's move down to our next tight end in his own tier here. Someone that was a player I did not draft at all last season. Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts was a late 3rd, early 4th round pick in underdog drafts last year, and I was laughing at it. I was going, oh my gosh, You fools, you clowns. I agree, Kyle Pitts, the best tight end prospect of all time. Hell, he goes higher than any tight end ever has in the NFL draft. This is because he was hyper productive in college at an extremely young age. He was drafted at 20 years old, and he was one of the best athletes the tight end position's ever seen. I mean, largest wingspan in the NFL, 1.5 touchdowns per game his final year in college. So Kyle Pitts, we can safely say, was the best tight end prospect of all time coming into the NFL. But we know tight ends take time to develop. I'll always be willing to sit out on the tight end their rookie season, buy in once we see that positive trajectory. Not only did we see the positive trajectory for Kyle Pitts, he came on the scene and he was unbelievable. This was a player that started out at 20 years old his rookie year and averaged 60 receiving yards a game, averaged 6.5 targets a game, almost a 20% team target share. If we're looking at, I don't even want to say tight ends because we've never seen this from a tight end, but if we're looking at pass catchers that at 21 years old managed to have 6 targets a game and 63 receiving yards per game as well, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Juju Smith-Schuster, Mike Evans. All those players were drafted as wide receiver ones going into year 2. Now you're getting Kyle Pitts with tight end eligibility. I tweeted this out and I got so much hate for it. But if you're going over to Underdog right now to see where Kyle Pitts is being drafted, Kyle Pitts is being drafted right next to Michael Pittman and Mike Williams. At the time I tweeted it out, I mean, you had Kyle Pitts about 6 to 7 selections behind those guys in ADP. Since then, Kyle Pitts has risen a bit. But what I was saying is, I would not be surprised if Kyle Pitts came out and straight up outscored, I repeat, outscored those players at the wide receiver position in a Mike Williams, in a Michael Pittman. And I already know we are going to have so many people in the comment section going, Mason, you clown, how could you ever say that? If you look at the total yards last year, Michael Pittman, 1,082. Mike Williams, 1,100. Kyle Pitts, 1,026. One of these players started off the year as a 20-year-old tight end. I'm all in on Kyle Pitts, the elite level breakout this upcoming season. Marcus Mariota will cap the ceiling in this overall offense, but that's why Kyle Pitts is down here in tier 2. He's not up there in tier 1. But of course, if you want to go draft Kyle Pitts in fantasy, what I'd recommend is you go draft him on Underdog Fantasy in the 3rd round. I mean, y'all know this by now. We were drafting every single night on the live stream on Underdog Fantasy because, in my opinion, it's the most fun place that you can draft in 2022. And when you go sign up to get in a draft on Underdog Fantasy and you use promo code FLOCK with a $10 deposit, they're going to match your deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. So it's essentially free. And literally with that $10 deposit, you're getting all of our 2022 rankings. You are getting our up-to-date 2022 fantasy football draft guide as well with a $10 deposit. Plus, you get to have some fun, draft with us in the live stream or draft with your friends or draft in the public lobby, whatever you want to do. You can find the link down there in the description. But let's go down to our next tier. Our next two guys, Darren Waller at 4. Now, I know a lot of people have dropped Darren Waller down where this is a tight end that you're now getting in the 5th round because, hell, dealing with a hamstring injury, not at camp, but he wasn't at camp last year. I mean, this is a tight end that over the past 3 seasons has averaged over 8 targets a game. He's averaged the tight end 4 finish over the past 3 years as well. The touchdown rate has never really been there, which is surprising because it's not like Darren Waller's a small tight end by any means. I mean, his touchdown rate's hovering about 3.5%. This is something that can dramatically come up. There's no reason that Darren Waller can't get to a touchdown rate at 7, 8, 9%. And if we have that outlier type season for Darren Waller here, then all of a sudden he does have the tight end 1, the tight end 2 upside overall. Now, the concern is, Davante Adams coming over. How many targets is Davante Adams going to be taking? I mean, I think it's highly unlikely that Darren Waller gets back to a 26% team target share that he saw back in 2020. But still, this is a player that has a crap ton of upside. We should expect that the Las Vegas Raiders are close to being a top 5 team in the NFL in passing yards this upcoming season as they were a year ago. I like Darren Waller at 4. I'm going to be taking the discount on him in round 5. And George Kittle will be our 5th tight end off the board. I've had a lot of questions saying, are we sure we can be drafting George Kittle here? This is a tight end that is going to be having a rush first quarterback and Trey Lance coming in. Maybe Trey Lance running the ball is going to limit the overall upside of what we get with some of the pass catchers in this offense. That may be true. That may be true. But I want to stand by the fact that I think George Kittle is truly one of the most talented players in the NFL and possibly the most talented tight end in the NFL. And I know I sound very aggressive when I say this, but if you go through and look at his yards per route run over the past 3 years, these are video game type numbers. This is way back in the day when you used to play NCAA and you decide that you wanted to go through and create your little player to win the Heisman. This is what you came away with. You came away with probably about 3 yards per route run over the past 3 years. Nobody can come remotely close to this. Over the past 3 years, George Kittle at 3 yards per route run. And if we're looking at a Travis Kelce, the best guy at the position in fantasy, he's sitting there at 2.4. So yeah, the situation's not great for George Kittle, but that's why we have him down here at 5 and not at 1. Let's go down to our next tier. Our next tier is going to have Dalton Schultz at 6. Dalton Schultz, best situation you could ever ask for. This is a tight end that is stepping into an offense that should be at the very top of the NFL in pace of play. At least they've been over the past 3 years. And also passing rate over expectation. We just know that the Dallas Cowboys offense will put points on the board. They were first in the NFL in points scored last year at 530. And Dalton Schultz was the tight end 5 last year. Now you have no Amari Cooper. On top of that, not only is Amari Cooper gone, you have no Cedric Wilson. Michael Gallup's hurt. James Washington's hurt. Unless CeeDee Lamb's going to see 12 targets a game, they're going to have to lean on Dalton Schultz here, specifically at the beginning portion of the season. I'm sorry, though, from a talent perspective, I know maybe this is the wrong take. Maybe this is the boring take. I can't put him up in the tier with Waller and Kittle. I just simply can't do it. I'm sorry. I understand that the situation is perfect, though. And then going down to our next tier, we're going to look at TJ Hawkinson at tight end 7. Here with Hawkinson, I understand, yes, we have yet to see that elite level breakout over the past 2 years. And yes, he's disappointed owners. But hell, he was the tight end 6 back-to-back seasons. Now I understand the tight end 6 is about the same as being the tight end 20, which is why you're about to see a very large tier of players for us. But I do want to say that I think he has the upside to continue to improve and actually can become a top 3 tight end in fantasy. I'm actually fine drafting middle rounds, even though we usually want to be avoiding those mid-round tight ends. This is a player that's increased his target share over the past 3 years from 13% to 17% to 20%. This is a tight end that's stepping into his age, 24, 25 season? A top 10 pick of the position, a great athlete, a great prospect. You don't expect these tight ends to break out till 25, 26 years old regardless. Go look at Mark Andrews. I'm still buying into TJ Hawkinson. I don't think it's a bad thing to do at all. I think if you draft TJ Hawkinson at his current ADP, which is around pick 90, if it doesn't work out, it's going to be a small miss. But if he does hit his ceiling, it's going to be a big hit. Now, going over to our next tight end in this tier, we are going to have Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert is in a bad situation in that we know he's not going to be the top option in his offense. That should be A.J. Brown. He's going to be competing for targets with Devonta Smith, but I am expecting this to be a very concentrated offense between those 3 guys. I'm not expecting that you're going to have a wide receiver 3, a wide receiver 4 here leeching targets off each other and really capping the upside of the overall top guys in the offense. And with Dallas Goedert, what I love to see is the splits with and without Zach Ertz. Without Zach Ertz, we've seen 15 games where Dallas Goedert's averaging over 6 targets a game, where he's averaging 58 receiving yards a game. And that's compared to 4.5 targets a game and 35 receiving yards per game in games where Zach Ertz actually played. We look at 2.6 yards per route run this past season for Dallas Goedert. Literally, this ties with George Kittle. The only guy that this is actually behind is, Kittle. He's an elite level talent stuck in a pretty bad situation. I think that this should be the year you're willing to buy into Dallas Goedert, though, because you do have the departure of Zach Ertz. Now, let's go down to our next tier. And Thomas, I don't know if this tier list is getting too long, but if you could you even skip a tier? Because after Dallas Goedert, I understand the ADP looks like there's not that big of a drop off, but in my opinion, there is a massive, massive fall off at the position where if I don't get one of those top 8 players, I'm probably just going to wait until the very end of my draft, if I'm going to be completely honest. But if you wanted to draft someone in this range, the guy we're going to rank here is going to be a Dawson Knox. I think Dawson Knox has some serious red flags. Yeah, he was the tight end 9 last year, looked like a breakout. But in reality, his yards per route run went from 1.3 to 1.2, then to 1.3 over the past 3 years. Those have stayed the same. His air yards per game went from 32 to 31 to 34. That's really stayed the same. The only gap you've had, the only real difference you've seen is the touchdown rate. The touchdown rate went from 4 to 6 to almost 13%. The most volatile statistic in fantasy football. We can project Dawson Knox to have a higher touchdown rate than league average, though, because the offense he plays in, of course, like he should have a higher touchdown rate than Kyle Pitts. But I don't expect Dawson Knox to ever really have true game-winning upside. Just not a player I'm that interested in. Pat Freiermuth is going to be our next tight end at tight end 10. Freiermuth goes like 30 picks behind Dawson Knox in these drafts. So usually I actually find myself with a decent amount of Freiermuth. This is a player that if we're looking at games with and without Eric Ebron, he actually averaged 5.5 targets a game without Eric Ebron. He averaged almost 12 fantasy points per game in those contests, and down at 7.5 fantasy points per game in games where Eric Ebron actually played. Obviously, Ebron gone this upcoming season. We don't exactly know what the quarterback play is going to be between the combination of Trubisky and Kenny Pickett, but we do know that those young quarterbacks, those quarterbacks that don't necessarily have the arm strength or the accuracy to get the ball on the outside, maybe it's a timing issue. I don't know. A lot of times they will lean on that tight end. Freiermuth was a very good year one, something that you really never expect to see. So I think that if we continue to see some development from Pat Freiermuth, if he takes a step forward into just a true 100% target share tight end at his position, you're not splitting that work with Eric Ebron. He does have some upside, possibly get ahead of this tier. Tight end 11 is going to be Zach Ertz. Here with Zach Ertz, if you're playing in a league where you can make trades and you know that there's going to be an active trade marketplace in your actual league, hell yeah, go through, draft Zach Ertz at the top of this tier, to be completely honest. Because Zach Ertz should be very strong to start the season when you have no DeAndre Hopkins through the first 6 weeks, just because there will be targets available here. I mean, we know this is going to be a fast-paced offense. At the same time, this is going to be a team that looks to throw the ball very often. So Zach Ertz is stepping into a pretty good situation when you have no DeAndre Hopkins through the first 6 weeks. But long-term wise, I think Zach Ertz is not going to be one of those players that could really help you through the bye weeks, help you specifically at the end of the season as well. Because we have to remember, not only are they going to get DeAndre Hopkins back, who can get close to 10 targets a game in his own right, but they also drafted Trey McBride as the first tight end off the board in this year's NFL draft. So I do think you get Trey McBride implemented into this offense more and more as the season goes on, where I think Zach Ertz is the perfect example of someone that could have a very strong start that you want to be selling high after the first month of the season. But at 11, it's going to be fine. At 12, in this same tier, we're going to have Cole Kmet. I mean, here with Cole Kmet, he's going to be second in Chicago in targets. He has to compete with Darnell Mooney, and that is it. He has been very inefficient, though. I was a lot more on Cole Kmet at the beginning of the offseason when his price was significantly cheaper, because I was looking at Cole Kmet saying, hell, this is a player that, scored 0 touchdowns last year, but we know touchdowns are extremely volatile. This should bounce back. This is a tight end that averaged almost a 17% team target share. There's nobody for him to compete with in Chicago. I was all over Cole Kmet before his price went through the roof, but now that you have to pay a premium on him, and we're looking at a player that had 1.3 yards per route run last year, it's playing with a bad quarterback in a bad offense. I think Kmet's someone that has a very high floor, but a very capped ceiling, if that's going to make sense. I mean, 1.3 yards per route run last year, 1 yard per route run as a rookie. Now our next tight end, almost identical to Cole Kmet for me, it is going to be Irv Smith Jr., someone else that I was really on at the very beginning of the offseason before his value went through the roof. I mean, now you have to pay a premium on Irv Smith Jr. It's much harder for me to go out there and draft him. It does sound like he's going to be good to go week 1. Of course, you love to see that for Irv Smith Jr. Kevin O'Connell should have this as a more pass-happy offense. Overall, he gets to play alongside Justin Jefferson, and if Adam Thielen were to go down again, I think Irv Smith Jr. probably sees a larger role in the red zone. Still an extremely young player. Was drafted in 2019 in that same draft class. Then you had guys like TJ Hawkinson, Noah Fant. But the difference with an Irv Smith Jr. here is he was 20 years old at the time of the NFL draft. Very similar to Kyle Pitts, an extremely young player at this point. And then our tight end 14 that we are going to find a way to sneak in here will be Mike Gesicki. Now, we've had to move Gesicki down as of late because sounds like you are getting training camp reports coming out saying, oh, with the new coaching staff coming over, Mike Gesicki may be in line more as a blocking tight end, which if we go back and look at him at Penn State, it's not like Mike Gesicki is built to be an inline blocker. I mean, Gesicki is an elite level athlete. I assume that this is someone that you actually want there on the field. I know you have Tyreek. I know you have Jalen Waddle. But, I mean, would you rather have Gesicki running those routes over the middle, or would you rather have Cedric Wilson? I mean, I like the talent profile of Gesicki. Obviously, it's hard to project him for a lot of volume, though, when you're playing alongside those top 2 wide receivers, and at the same time, probably a low-volume passing offense when you have Tua Tagovailoa. Now, let's drop down to our last 3 tight ends here in this bottom tier. And yeah, these are really the only guys I think are worth drafting. I don't think you should be picking up an extra tight end as a backup after, our next 3. But Robert Tonyan, next guy, in my opinion, he's literally Dawson Knox in Green Bay. I went from saying that he was the worst pick in fantasy last year. It was horrendous. People were drafting him coming off a season where he had a 19% touchdown rate. The most volatile statistic in fantasy football. People thought that was going to be maintained. In reality, his target share did not go anywhere. It was at 10.9%, then went to 10% in this offense. He had 3.6 targets per game in 2020, 3.5 targets per game in 2021. The only difference is the touchdowns came back down to where you naturally assume that they would be. Now, I will say, he's in a much better situation this year. Of course, dealing with an injury, he is having to rehab his way back. But when he does get back, you're not going to have Devontae Adams. I hated drafting Robert Tonyan last season, but this year when you're getting a significant discount on the same player in a better situation, sign me up for Robert Tonyan this season. Now our next tight end going to be Albert O here at tight end 16. So you have the rookie tight end out of UCLA getting a ton of buzz in camp right now. They're saying Albert O may be used as an inline blocking tight end, which you don't love to hear. He was a very efficient tight end through the first 2 years of his NFL career, sitting at 2.1 yards per route run. Of course, it's a very small sample, and he did have a big play there. So it is going to be able to skew the sample quite easily. But at the end of the day, this is a tight end that's flashed. Tim Patrick leaving this offense does open up targets all around. I think he's a tight end with upside if you're looking at his athletic profile combined with his size. And obviously, you have Russell Wilson. And our last tight end in this tier, you're going to have Hunter Henry. But to be completely honest with you guys, Hunter Henry can slide up. Hunter Henry, if you wanted to put him all the way as high as 9, I don't give a damn. We've already done that research. We've already illustrated the fact that from tight end about 6 to 8, like that mid tight end 1, in tight end 20, so someone you're just going to get off the waiver wire, in reality, they're all about the same. So if you're drafting a tight end in fantasy, what I'm probably going to do if I were you is either grab one of those elite difference-making players where we know their gap in points per game is going to be very hard to overcome elsewhere in your starting lineup. Say, go out there and take a Kelce at the end of round 1, take an Andrews at the end of round 2, take a Pitts at the end of round 3, take a Waller or a George Kittle at the 4-5 turn. Go get one of those players that could finish as the tight end 1 overall, or to be completely honest, just wait until the second to last round and then grab Robert Tonyan and Albert O, or Robert Tonyan and Hunter Henry, or Robert Tonyan and Mike Gesicki. Just wait until the very last 2 rounds. Pick up 2 guys, because in reality, they're probably going to be very similar to the Dawson Knox your league mate is drafting in round 8. But I think that's all I got for you. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. Y'all know we'll be live tonight with a Real Money Fantasy Football Draft. Hoping to see you there. And yeah, that's it. I hope you have a great day.